All right, happy Wednesday. I My name is Jason Ricks. I'm here with Living a Purposeful Lifestyle, Ep2, and I'm so happy today to have my guest, the franchise guy, John Anderson. So, welcome to the show, John. Thrilled to have you, and appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is a first for me as well. The whole LinkedIn Live thing. I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah, so the LinkedIn Live is a new phenomenon, and I will tell you, this being our second show, we learned a lot. We uh, hope to keep learning, but thrilled to have you. So let's get right into it. So I guess the first thing is for our audience that maybe don't know you, why don't you talk about like what your uh, what your history is, and how did you get to where you even started thinking
Yeah.
about being a franchisee?
No, it's perfect. And I'll tell you maybe to briefly so they know where I'm at right now. Basically, what I do, elevator pitch, right? I help people learn about franchising. If it makes sense, we fit them into a franchise consultant, franchise broker, for lack of a better term. So I got started, boy. So I went out to California in the 80s, went to college at USC, immediately got into business. And, when my fraternity brothers were going down to Cabo San Lucas for Mazatlan, I think it was, for spring break, I was doing training for a business. I actually was a franchise. Of course, I was 19 years old. I had no idea what that meant back then. But it was a business experience. I ran a painting company for the summer, and that was my first, introduction to franchising. It didn't last long. I did that for a couple summers and then graduated and got into mortgage banking. And so did that for a long time. And then when we moved back to Oklahoma in 2006, didn't want to recreate the wheel, didn't want to try and build a whole new client base in mortgage banking, and wanted to do something different. And I always wanted to be in control of my day and in control of my income and lifestyle. And so we started looking into franchising. And
Awesome.
in the process, I came across a franchise consultant and went through his processes, which is what I do now. This was 2006, so it was a little bit different with the technology back then, but the process was basically the same. And we found our first franchise that way.
Awesome. So, what was your first company that you dipped the toe, or did you feel like? I guess the best question maybe is, did you dip your toe in with the first franchise, or was it a cannonball off the 10-foot side?
Well, I think my wife would tell you I probably did a cliff dive and went all in. So. Part of the reason for moving back here was, just a different quality of life. We had triplets in 1998. So, she came home one day, was also a mortgage banker in California. Said, I want to stay home with the kids. Let's move back home where your family is. And so that was the impetus there. But, before we had left Orange County, we had birthday parties at a place out there where this was kind of the rage, and it started in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, with the inflatables on the inside and the organized structural party and the hosts and everything, and we thought, wow, this is a great business. Didn't think a whole lot more of it, and went on about our lives. And so when we moved here, the franchise consultant introduced me to several brands, and we looked at a few different things, and nothing really resonated except for, you got 5-year-old triplets at the time, 6-year-old maybe. When they float this business in front of you called Bounce You, where you get to host these parties and be kind of the Disney of Tulsa, Oklahoma, it immediately resonated with us, and that's what we went for. And so when I say went all in, a year later we opened one in Las Vegas, and within a short time I was on what they call the Franchise Advisory Council, which is a corporate organized group of franchisees. I became president of the Franchise Association, or the Association of Franchisees. And through all of that, I learned a lot about running multiple locations, about locations 1,000 miles away, and about the corporate operation of a franchise. I was involved in our major brand refresh around 2012. they flew me out to Phoenix 2 or 3 times a year. So it was a great experience, and definitely figure I went all in on that.
Wow. I mean, that's like going from 0 to 100 in a very short period of time.
That's right.
All the while raising triplets. I have one daughter at home that's young, and my 2 boys are grown now. But I can't imagine having children that young. 5, and 3 of them all at 5 years old, and then trying to do that. So one of the things that's interesting, about that is how did you gravitate, or how did you kind of work through that process of with regards to managing both locations? I mean, that's quite a bit of real estate between there. And let's be honest, if you get a call on Tuesday morning that Joe, the manager's out, it's you're not next door. So kind of how did you work through that, and kind of what was your process a little bit on that?
How much time do we have? So you're right. I mean, there were some examples of it, and I would tell you that particular business, one of the lessons learned is I don't think it's suited to remote ownership. Now, so I always considered opening a second one. We sold that one in Vegas, by the way, in 2013. And I considered another one if it was in what I call driving distance, like, for us, maybe 3 or 4 hours. And never did end up doing another one. But it, the business is really designed to be what we call owner operator, which is really hands-on. And I turned that upside down from the day one. My very original vision statement was, I'm not going to work in this business on a daily basis. Now, I think for the first couple of years, no doubt I put 40 hours a week in. But for a business that does 80% of its revenue Friday through Sunday, I never worked a weekend in 13 years of running this business. So, it outside of 2020, where that particular industry has been very hard hit, has been very profitable from month 3. So, managing the Tulsa location was not that difficult, but managing 1,000 miles away was, and we went through a few managers, and yeah. So again, I've got a couple stories there. If you want me to get into it, I'm happy to. But we can just leave it at there was certainly challenges there, and there was one episode where I literally was on a plane within 24 hours and fired the manager. So,
man, as a guy that currently runs, multiple locations, I know the ebb and flows of you wake up and you go to bed and everything's great, and wake up the next day and you can have multiple fires, and that doesn't happen all the time, but boy, when it does happen, it sure makes for interesting times.
Yeah.
So you're playing around with Bounce U. You've obviously gained a lot of knowledge in participating in those councils and being more involved with the franchise at a corporate level. So what's the next step of the evolution? So my understanding is that you look at a different franchisee at that point, right? Or a different franchise.
Yeah. And so, I took advantage of, I got into franchising, not just not for the money but a lot of for the freedom, right? To come and go as I please and have leverage other people's efforts. And I had a great team there. So for a few years, I was focused on coaching and scouts and, as the kids were growing up. So once we sold that Bounce U in Las Vegas, another year or two go by, the kids are in high school, very self-sufficient. I'm thinking, yeah, we could use a little more money. What else do I want to do? I've kind of been there, done that with the Bounce U business. What's next? This was 2015. And as I started looking at what else I might want to do, I kept coming back to the process. I kept coming back to the guy in 2006 who introduced me to my first franchise, and that process and all of the things that I did as a mortgage broker that I liked. So there's a lot of pieces to it I didn't like. The money was good, and helping and consulting with people was really good. Dealing with real estate agents, not so much, but and that's again another conversation. But as I thought about what I really liked about that and his process, I thought I would be really good at what he did, and I started exploring it. And in early 2016, joined an organization in the industry that does the training and provides you access to the franchises and things like that. And got set up and got started as a franchise consultant.
Awesome. So then my understanding is that you are involved with a franchise in Oklahoma now, where called Knockouts, right? So was that after you started doing the consulting?
One of the interesting things about becoming a franchise consultant is you get to look under the hood at a professional level that the general public doesn't get to franchises, and to lots of them, and hundreds of them. And so I saw a number of things that were interesting, and my wife really didn't want to take on a full-time role. This, between running Bounce U and doing this, was full-time for me. And so really the only way for me to entertain something else and grow the portfolio, if you will, was more of a semi-absentee, passive kind of deal. And so I looked at a few things as time went by. And so in 2018, started working with Knockouts. And Knockouts Haircuts for Men is the full title, based down in Dallas. And typically I'm down there about once a month now as their franchise developer as well. But yeah, I got to working with one of the candidates that I was working with, a client who was down in San Antonio, and we went through the process, introducing him to Knockouts. And then I helped some folks from Ohio get set up with Knockouts. And the relationship kind of grew from there. It just became kind of clear to me that this was a good opportunity for us as well. So yeah, my wife and I bought the rights to 5. We got the first one opened in May of 2019, and we're working on number 2 and 3 here in Tulsa right now.
Outstanding. Well, congratulations on that. And we certainly wish you much success with that project going forward. So, as you think about your evolution through the franchise world, and to kind of let's go back to, thinking about with those little girls,
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things and the whole reason I decided to do this show was to talk about, from a business point of view, of how different people choose different avenues within the business world to live a purposeful life. So I'd like you to kind of talk with the folks about why franchising is such a good option for people to have better control of their lives and better control of their future.
Well, so I like to answer that question by starting out with why it's not. So first off, I do believe that if you get matched up with the right franchise, well over 90% of the population can be successful with a franchise business. But if you're very entrepreneurial, if the first question somebody asks me is, well, this is a great men's hair salon, but can we sell CBD oil? Or can we, do women's extensions? Or can we do nails? You're not going to be a good fit. You need to be, if you're Bill Gates and you're trying to build computers out of your garage and that excites you, you're not going to like the constraints of franchising. What franchising is great for is somebody who's got drive, ambition, self-starter, team leaders, can build a team and has the vision for what their business is, but they don't have a widget or a service or a better mousetrap to build. They don't even know where to start with it. And they so they can play within the framework. They like the idea of the systems and the processes, but they just don't know where to start. The franchises give you that. Now, obviously, they're every shape, size, model, whatever, from home base to huge retail space and everything in between, B2B, B2C. All of that is part of the process that I go through talking to people about what they would like to do. And we didn't even talk about specific brands. We talk about their world, their skills, their background, and then help them get in front of franchises that fit so that they're set up for success.
So in your mind, as you think about the people that you have helped along their journey, and you kind of look at especially the ones that have really been successful, are there 2 or 3 traits that maybe they have that you really can put your finger on and say, man, these are 2 or 3 things that if people have this, they're wildly more likely to be successful?
Well, the number one thing, and this is going to be almost universal with franchising, is the ability to follow the system. And so if you ask anybody in franchising why somebody failed, so you take the opposite of your question, it's going to be most of the time they didn't follow the system. Here, they paid for this training, they paid for the support, they paid for the systems, and for some reason, maybe they were too entrepreneurial, like I referenced a minute ago, or who knows what their motivation is. But 10% of those people just shouldn't be in the system, and it's because of that. Other times they fail because it's health or divorce. Those are two other big ones. But and there are some bad franchises out there too. But the people who, so beyond being able to follow the system, it's and there are some specific franchises that might be different. But if you take the world of 80 or 90% of them, follow the system, self-starter, because nobody's waking you up in the morning. You got to get up and get after it. And team player, willing to embrace the culture of the franchise and just execute. They're giving you a model and a playbook or a recipe book. So depending on people's backgrounds, if they're into sports, I'll call it a playbook. If they're into, cooking or whatever, it's a recipe book. But it's the same thing. They go here, run with it, and go execute. So sales managers, salespeople, middle managers, even C-suite people for sure, often all make great franchisees because of the skill sets and the drive and the passion and the ability to build a team.
Yeah, and I think one misconception often when it comes to franchises is that it requires a ton of money to get involved, and so I think that fear of how to fund a business venture at times can keep a large portion of people maybe who would be good fit for franchising out of the market. So maybe you could speak to that about what the realities of that are, and that maybe there's more opportunity than what most people think.
Yeah, I think that to get started in most franchises that can deliver an executive income, I mean, we can talk about cliche terms like scaling and whatnot, and some can, but if you've got 50 grand, there's funding for the difference. I mean, there's a lot of good opportunities that are 70 to 100,000 total startup. There's a lot that are in that under 200 range. So if you can get your hands on 50, you've got a net worth of 200, 250,000 and decent credit. The SBA has some great loan programs out there. There are some really good programs for using your retirement money, 401ks or IRAs that can be rolled over tax-free, penalty-free, and some real tax advantages actually to using them to invest in your business instead of in mutual funds or whatnot. And then there's some more creative too. So there's a few franchises that have their own in-house franchising, and that's always attractive. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to get started. Personally, we got started with our first one just using a home equity loan. So, a lot of people could get into things that way too.
Outstanding. So when you look at it, like, is there anything that you've learned along the way, or maybe one or two things that you're like, man, I wished I would have known this when I first started, or when I first started looking at this, that you can kind of share with us?
I think, I'm trying to think because we certainly had plenty of challenges. I guess in the beginning, I was definitely too hard on managers and staff, and didn't have the patience that I think it should. More than happy to give them direction and the freedom to execute, but if it went sideways, especially those first couple of years, sometimes I was a little too hard on them. Now when I talk to them, it's like, what, my approach to especially my leadership is, you guys are the face of the business. I've empowered you to do that. Make a decision that you think, if you own the business, this is the decision you would make, and I'll back you. Now, if I don't like it, we're going to have a conversation about it, but I won't be mad if if that's your intent and that's what you felt and you went at it that way. So, but when I first got started, there was some short conversations that weren't appropriate. So,
yeah, but I think that's normal. I mean, I think back to when I first become a district supervisor, right? And, I look back on some of those conversations, and the fact that people didn't knock my lights out is probably by the grace of God, right? And I think you just learn over time that, people are going to make mistakes, and that truly growth comes from making mistakes, right? Like, you're not going to learn anything if you're so afraid you're going to break it. And so I could see how, new to that kind of a position, and, that's your first dabbling. I could see that being the case. So I think that's great advice for young folks out there, is as you move into leadership positions, people are looking up to you. They're looking to you to be a leader, but to also allow them the bandwidth to make mistakes so that they can learn. We did have a question come through from the audience. Um, LinkedIn user here wants to know, once you get these businesses up and running, are there companies you partner with to help them stay successful? So that's a pretty broad question, but maybe it gives us something we can dig into there a little bit.
Well, and interestingly enough, there's franchises that do this particular, business. But I guess I would answer that two ways. Number one, any good franchise system is going to have support and systems in place to do exactly that. So, it's almost a little bit insulting to them if you're having to work with an outside consultant to either, and typically it's one of two situations. You're going spiraling down and need help to get back to break even or get back to profitability and grow your business, or you're really looking to go to that proverbial next level and you need help. I would tell you that the majority, 80% or more of franchising fits in that middle, where they get to a level they're really comfortable with. They do running a good business, making money. They have a great lifestyle, and they're happy with that. But typically, most franchise systems have support and or coaching built in to help those people that want it, especially. The other thing that's often not thought about is the peer groups. So, even if you're just 100 miles away, or some of the bigger cities, like when we were in California, if you're in Orange County and you've got somebody in San Diego or LA, or even within Orange County, there's a big, you're not really competing against each other when you're with the same brand. You're having the same problems, you're having the same successes, and the support that you give each other really helps everybody, get to that 1 + 1 = 3 kind of situation.
Yeah. So kind of something a little bit to a different topic, and maybe I'm asking this from a little bit of a selfish reason, but I think that there's a lot of people, I think in 2020, 2019, there's been a lot of folks looking at writing books. And I think that that's become a new phenomenon with people and professionals of wanting to impart knowledge, and it seems to be an evolution. And that's one that you've already kind of walked through. And, as I've shared with you, I'm kind of working on a work myself. So, talk to me about, what that process was like for you, why you wrote it, and then after you went through all the work and writing it, publishing it, and all that, like, how did that make you feel, and what did you think?
All right, so there's a couple questions in there, so you may have to refocus me here in a second, but I'll tell you how I got started. So I was into this business less than a year, and when you get started as a franchise consultant, the way you meet people generally is you buy leads, right? So there are these internet portals where people out in the public go and click, and they end up, putting their information in, trying to get information. Next thing you know, they got a bunch of people like me calling them, and it's not a very good system, and it's frustrating on their side and on mine. So I reached out to, after about 6 months, an old sales coach of mine. The guy's name is Eric Lofholm. I have no problem giving him a plug, saleschampion.com. And I've worked with him off and on since 9/11 in 2001, right? He helped me a lot in the mortgage business. And so we started talking, again, this was 2016, towards the end of the year. I'm like, Eric, this is frustrating. What do I do? And, how did you, what can I do? And so we started talking about some different things. One of the things he said, it's not that hard to write a book, and it will really build your credibility. it'll get your message out, and I can help you get it, done. And so I worked with him. He'd written, I think, 3 books at that time, and they were hardcovers. And I didn't take that point. We went straight to paperback with it, but got it published on Amazon. And it was really, you think about it, especially people in our world of whether you're in sales or management running, you've got the majority of a book in your computer already. It's there. It's all these resources that you give to people, and then the rest is in your head. I mean, you've already got the book. It's taken the time to organize it in a fashion that will benefit somebody, benefit the reader ultimately. And so when Eric put it to me that way, I thought, well, yeah, I've got, probably what's going through your head right now. I'm like, I've got all these things in my computer that I give to clients as we're going through the process already. I've been through the process. I can describe it. I can talk to them about mindset. And that's really where it all came. I mean, it's not a long book. It's, 21 chapters of, 3 or 4 pages each, but it really, I think, does a good job of introducing, franchising and the franchise research process to people.
And if people wanted to find that book, what's the name of the book, John?
So it started out, I initially published it in 2017. It's on Amazon as 21 Days to Starting Your Own Business. It's, I got it right here. So I don't know if this is.
Yeah, perfect.
So, and that's on Amazon. And I did a second edition earlier this year, and I reframed it to Be the CEO of Your Life. I have not gotten that edition published to Amazon yet, but that's the second edition that I send out in a PDF. So,
well, I'm sure if they'll follow you at LinkedIn, John Anderson at LinkedIn, as that becomes available, I'm sure that data will be out there and be available.
Anybody that wants it, if they reach out on LinkedIn or website email, I mean, the website's right there. My email is john@thatfranchiseguy.com. I'm happy to send them a PDF of it and just give them some resources to learn a little bit.
One of the things that first drew me to you, John, was how much you give back. So I like your content, and just in the time that you and I have been preparing for our conversation and looking at several things, you have been so gracious with your time and with your knowledge, and I just want to tell you that that's admirable, and thank you for that. One of the things that I look at when I look at franchising, and as someone who runs multiple businesses, it has been something that I've looked into several times. One of the questions that I would like to see answered, and before I ask my question, if there's anybody watching that's got a question, we'd love to answer your questions. We got a little bit of extra time, and that will help answer any questions that you may have about franchising. But one of the questions that comes to mind for myself, and when I look at it, is and when you start researching, you start looking, it is almost daunting how much is out there, and you don't really realize just how many businesses are actually franchised. And what's one of the processes that you kind of go through, or how do you kind of help someone who's working with you to narrow that process down without obviously sharing anything proprietary, but how do you go through that process and really drill it down to where you're like, okay, this is the right option for you?
Well, and there really isn't anything that secretive about it. In fact, my process is essentially the book I wrote. I wrote it in kind of a DIY format so that people could follow that and do it themselves. But it really is my process too. And number one, I alluded to a few minutes ago when I was talking about people clicking on the internet and leads that come to guys like me. There's a lot of sites out there that do a very good job of looking like a franchise website. And when you put your name and email and phone number in there, that gets sold off to people, and they just start, again, that's my role when I pay for those leads. Of course, I'm calling people and sending them emails and wanting to get on the phone and educate them. And not everybody's quite as I mean, my approach, I hate to even call it sales, right? I'm a consultant. I want to lead people to a decision, whether that's to buy or not to buy a franchise is up to them. If I have to convince somebody to do it, somebody's going to end up, unhappy in the end. So but the process itself is really about me getting to know you or the prospect or the candidate, and helping them learn about franchising, educating them about what's involved in franchising, and then putting myself in their shoes, knowing their background, their skills, their needs. What do they need in a lifestyle? What do they need financially? What do they have financially? And then we also use an online assessment. That's part of it too. It's not a complicated one, but it's kind of like a DISC assessment for franchising. And so we've got a number of tools that over 2 or 3 phone calls, we work together to build out a profile. And then I'll take that profile and screen it against the 500 plus franchises that I work with. Usually, that process is objectively, comes up with some, subjectively, using my experience, comes up with some, and then I'll take that 20 or 30, make sure I, find out the ones that I think are the best fits, make sure they're available in that city where the person is, and we'll narrow it down to 5 or 6 to talk about at a time, because that's a manageable piece. And that, it does take a little bit of investment of people's time, but there's no cost or anything otherwise. And by the way, that's another question a lot of people have about what I do. We work much like executive recruiters, so there is no fee ever to the clients or candidates that we're working with on the front end. But we do get paid by the franchises on the back end if they decide to work or buy a franchise.
So I gotta ask you this. This is something that's just came to my mind is how on earth do you keep track of 500 franchises? I mean, that has got to be a full-time job, just keeping track of the changes within those, and just, that's 500 CEOs, that's 500. I mean, that's a lot of data. So how do you kind of keep up to date on that stuff?
Well, in the days when we travel, I would be at 3 or 4 conferences a year, where most of these folks are, not all in one, but I'm in 2 different industry organizations. So they've got 300 or 400 each, and there's some overlap. So, between the 2 combined and some independent arrangements, I've got about 500. But the honest answer, and I'm very upfront and transparent about all this stuff, the honest answer is I don't. I mean, I know 100 well, I know 50 better, I know 25 really well, and the other 400 it's all technology. So as people are looking for certain things, or I create the profile on what a candidate, what kind of things they're going to be good at and would be a good fit and would like. I learn a lot about franchises I haven't worked with a lot that way, because I go, this concept has the potential to be a good fit. Let me introduce it. And if together we decide to because the first call, once we identify 2 or 3 that they may really want to be a part of, I'm on that call with them. I mean, we don't just introduce them to the franchise and say bye. I kind of hold their hand through the whole research and discovery process too.
Awesome. So we got another question from the audience. How often do you meet with someone that would like to start a business and you realize it's just not meant for them? And how do you give them the hard truth?
It happens a lot. And so that's one of the reasons I like to point out that it doesn't cost anything to work with me, because all I ask is for sincerity and transparency. If you have a sincere interest in learning about franchises, I want to help. I'll help you get to the end of that. But absolutely, I've made more friends. If you look on LinkedIn, I've got testimonials from quite a few of them of people who never bought a franchise, but they appreciated the process and what they learned, and that I helped them get to a self-awareness that, they really weren't cut out for a business, or weren't cut out for a business at that particular time. I have had people come back to me a year later and say, now's the time. So, but I think it's important to go into it with, and not every consultant in my role does this, although there's a lot more hard sell type out there. But my feeling is, when we get started working together, I want to help you find your next big thing. And sometimes that next big thing is what they're currently doing. They're already doing it, and they just need some validation of that. They need to make sure they've looked across the fence and that the grass isn't greener. A lot of times they may find something else. I help with franchises specifically. I've helped people who ultimately learned what they needed to learn and decided to open their own, whatever that industry is. I had a woman I worked with last summer. It just was a perfect senior care franchisee, and she ultimately decided to do it on her own. And her unique circumstances were such that worked. But in terms of people who just flat out aren't cut out for it, and me having to tell them that, that's pretty rare, because they usually figure it out before I have to tell them.
That's great. And I think one of the things that you said there that's kind of interesting is, and for the audience, is, going out and researching and finding out what you need or what you need to do. Sometimes there's things that need to happen for people to be ready, right? And so it's kind of like, going to school to be a doctor. You don't just say, I want to be a doctor, and then tomorrow you're a doctor. But I think sometimes working with someone like you could also help people say, okay, I really like this industry. This is a franchise I'd be interested in. And maybe they go out and get a job in the industry for a year or two to learn a little bit more about it, and really be prepared for that which they're taking on. Because to your point, with your first franchise, there were some things that, had you had a little bit more experience in that leadership management realm, perhaps you could have started off on a larger or on a greater leap, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that that's 100%.
You got a comment here that says, it's great that you're there for them. The World Wide Web can be overwhelming, and I couldn't say it better myself. I mean, the amount of data out there, as it relates to just about any subject, and especially business, is just overwhelming. It is absolutely astounding.
Well, and what's often not obvious, especially to somebody who's new to franchising or new to business and doing the research, is 96%, let's say, of what's out there is sales material. So it's designed to make things look good and make the phone ring and get you to get hooked. And as I said too, in many cases, it's not even the franchise themselves; it's somebody else who's pitching it. And so you definitely need to be careful to go on there. And the message I'm trying to get, exactly what this comment was, is to convey that exact message, to be redundant, is I'm here to help you cut through all the noise. Don't start clicking on every button on the internet, because it's just going to make things worse, and you're gonna tune out and turn it off and not even want to take my call. So and I'm certainly not the only one that operates in this space. I'm certainly not the only one that operates with this type of integrity or approach. There's a lot of good professionals out there. So but find one, preferably me, but find one if you're going to get into franchising. It'll save you a lot of time for sure.
Yeah, I would say that in this situation, you need to have the trust with your franchise consultant, almost relevant with the pastor of your church, or someone you hold at that estate, because you're making a huge life decision. And the thing is that you've got to know when you sign those papers that you are it's a right fit. And I've heard you say that time and time again in the lead up to doing the show and today. And it's one of the things I admire about you, is you truly want people to land in a very in a place where they can be successful. And I admire you about that, and to your point, there are other guys out there, and make sure that when you're working with someone that they're trustworthy, and that their heart is helping you find the best situation for you, not just what's easier or quick for them.
Yeah, or how much they're getting paid. I mean, full transparency again. There's a wide variety out there of what the franchises will pay me in terms of placing people with them. So.
Yeah. So Stephen, thanks for your question. LinkedIn, we appreciate you. Stephen wants to know, due to COVID, are the food service franchises suffering and other segmented franchises souring? So I guess, I think that's a great question there. Is,
Sure.
as a franchisor, some of those companies struggling to attract new franchisees?
Well, yeah, and so I think that fitness is a category that's taken it, square up too. I mean, it's so food service. Yeah, I think there's, and I hate to use the word pivot, but there are some that were better at adjusting their offering. Drive-through coffee is actually up. Delivery like Domino's or something is actually. I mean, I don't work with them, so I don't know this, but off the top of my head, I think they're up. But a lot of sit-down places, particularly on the coast, we're a little insulated here in the Midwest, and we've been wide open since the middle of May. But on the coast, certainly they're not. And there's a lot of people that aren't going out, even here in Oklahoma, that aren't comfortable going out. So sure, those restaurants are down. But fitness, my hair salon franchises took it. Summer was really rough, down about 30%. Pretty much industry wide. It wasn't like we were better or worse. That's pretty much back to where we were last January. We're back. Fitness, though, is still a space that, number one, there's so much competition that there's going to be a lot of getting weeded out there. But the flip side is things like staffing and senior care and lab testing, and I mean there's a dozen categories of businesses that have actually grown in the pandemic times.
One other question that maybe would come to mind, pivoting off of that question, are you seeing some are the franchisors, are they really stepping up to help their franchisees through this time and to kind of share that burden? Because they obviously have a mutual interest in survivability.
100%. And that's one of the things that when we started, everybody kind of froze last year in March and April, and then it started to loosen up, and we actually got busier. It turned out the second half of 2020 was really strong in the franchise world as people discovered the independence of working at home and liking that. But one of the questions that, and in some industries it's more important than others, but we always coach the candidate to ask the franchisor, what did you do in second and third quarter last year? What did you do to help your franchisees when the government shut you down? How did you help them prepare to reopen? How did you support them? Did you waive your royalties for a period of time? Are you still waiving them? I mean, there's a huge, I don't say discrepancy, not the right word, but there's a wide range of how franchisors responded, from essentially sticking their head in the ground and not acknowledging it at all to bending over backwards to do whatever it takes, to support their franchisees and make sure they stay open, or as many as possible, can reopen and flourish.
So, John, I just can't thank you enough for your time today. As we head towards the finish here, I prefaced this yesterday evening when I talked to you, and something I'm very interested in is, as you look into what you're doing now and how it all ties together, how has your life around franchising really helped you find that purpose?
Well, I think I talked to the point here a little bit earlier, in that, everything I loved about my first career as a mortgage banker, and then my second career as a franchise operator is kind of wrapped into what I do now. Every conversation is different. I've never had the same conversation twice. Every candidate is different. Every franchisee I speak to, and every franchisor I speak to, they're all different. I work with 25 different franchises in the home care space alone. Every single one of them has a different culture, a different technology approach, a different sales approach. So it's just no day is the same. I love it. I mean, I absolutely feel like I found my calling with this business, being able to help people, get into the right situation, avoid bad situations, and work with great franchises. Yeah. I mean, I hope I answered your question there.
I think it's beautiful. And I think in a lot of ways, we answered a lot of that as we went through the interview today. So LinkedIn, YouTube, I so appreciate you joining us today. I hope that we filled in some blanks and perhaps maybe give you some information to think about. And I encourage you, if you have any interest or want to explore anything with the franchise world, that you reach out to John. You can, if you can't find him or you need to get in touch with him, please hit me up. I'll be happy to make the introduction. John, you were fabulous. Appreciate you. Until next week, this is Jason Rick signing off here at Living a Purposeful Lifestyle. We'll see you next week.